Imagine an MMO where player versus player battles could be anywhere from a small-scale engagement to an armada versus an armada, where real stakes are on the line, like losing your very ship and your money. A game where economy supports this sort of PvP-focused gameplay, and is the very lifeblood of the game. No matter how bad of a player you might be mechanically or even strategically, you can always find a role to fill on this fleet. Do you want to make your own mining corporation in an attempt to become the richest person ever? Or maybe create a pirate corporation that feeds on these such miners? The possibilities truly are quite limitless. You're probably sitting there thinking, well, nerdSlayer, out with it already. What game is this magically described game? EVE Online. Now, I might have described EVE Online as some sort of paradise sandbox games, and don't get it twisted for a second. The legends of the infamous EVE Online learning curve are certainly real. The image on screen is an understatement. The famous Star Wars saying of Mos Eisley being a hive of villainy and scum that applies to EVE Online as well. You've got trade gankers, people just trying to make a buck, Zergers trying to up their egos, and suicide gankers, people who just want to watch the world burn. EVE Online truly is a brutal place. But it's a brutal place people of all nationalities, ethnicities, gaming styles, and even temperaments can gather to either wage wars, establish trade, or create empires. Everyone in a weird way sort of bonds together, having to push through the learning curve, and EVE is a tough one, but if it wasn't such a rewarding one, you wouldn't have people continuing to lose enough ISK, the in-game currency, to be worth thousands of real-life dollars. Take the infamous battle known as the Halloween War, the bloodbath of BR5RB. It was a battle that lasted 21 hours involving over 7,548 players, with nearly 2,600 of those players in a single system at the same time. The estimated value of this battle was in the realm of $300,000 US. Where can you get that level of scale in an MMO? That is massive multiplayer online game personified. If you want to hear more about that battle, check out the video. It's located on CCP Games' YouTube channel. Another beauty of EVE is really the sheer amount of possibilities in the game, and diversity in types of players. Sure, you would certainly say that the hardcore audience is going to gravitate towards a title like EVE, but you even have CEOs of companies becoming lifelong EVE Online players. Just average Joes, just people with working lives and families and children and the like. EVE Online truly supports players of all styles and numbers. Just look at the amount of skill trees on screen. EVE Online is a game that you can truly customize nearly everything. So why do I title the video EVE Online is the best PvP MMO you won't play? Well, besides the aforementioned learning curve present in the game, which is certainly quite daunting for new players, but EVE Online truly has another critical flaw. This flaw keeps it from reaching a broader audience, and even appealing to a hardcore MMORPG player like myself. EVE Online's gameplay, lack of gameplay. That's really my mic drop moment. Watching gameplay of EVE Online is only ever exciting because of the stakes at play. The amount of ships on screen, the amount that could be possibly lost, the politics, the stories, the trash talk. Essentially everything except the actual gameplay of EVE Online is notable. This is crucial and why some people, including myself, have no desire to play EVE Online and instead just admire it from afar. These are the same people who probably periodically call the game a spreadsheet simulator. But don't take my word for it. Observe this flight on screen. Now, I'm sure an EVE Online fan can tell us all the tons of intricacies as to why this is a high-octane space fight, positioning, ability usage, and etc. But what it looks and feels like is two weightless ships. Yeah, I get it, it's space, but it still feels and looks weightless, floating around and shooting neon lasers at each other, barely any feedback registering whenever a hit lands, and next to no control over your ship. Combat in EVE Online is complex. I don't mean to belittle those aspects at all. Instead, I am being critical of how gameplay-less the fights play out in the game. In PvP, you can sort of get away with this, because the stakes are high and you could potentially lose your ship. But in repetitive PvE engagements, the combat isn't gripping enough to keep you interested. If you aren't a long-term thinker or a long-term goal-oriented person, or someone who cares more about the loot that you get from these engagements, you're going to find yourself bored to death from these fights. I mean, I personally was falling asleep when I tried to play EVE Online nearly a decade ago, and that sucks to say and it sucks to admit because I wanted so much to like the game. But I just can't find that sort of combat that gives players little to no control over their ship particularly fun, especially one where it just feels like you're playing laser tag in space. Now absolutely, EVE Online plays more like an RTS than an MMO, so it surely has more depth than other space games would have, but I just can't get past the point of an MMORPG playing like an RTS. Let's take a look back at Jump to Lightspeed expansion from Star Wars Galaxies. This is an expansion that released in Star Wars Galaxies the MMO, which was 14 years ago in 2004. Notice how every shot on screen has clear feedback and weight, quote unquote, to it. It gives the feel of really being in a dogfight against another player or even AI. Now I must mention, EVE Online came out before this expansion, so it surely should be judged accordingly, but EVE Online has had dozens of content expansions, graphical updates, and the like. And yet the combat still looks like it was stuck in 1999. There are yet more examples on the market that we could use to compare with EVE Online's combat, because ultimately, EVE Online does have competitors even if they might not necessarily be the same sort of game. Elite Dangerous, for example, a title that released in 2014, Elite is a game much like EVE Online that focuses less on dogfights like Star Wars Galaxies combat and more on economy and space exploration. And yet the combat looks exactly like you would expect from a space multiplayer game. The ability to feel the weight of your ship, both Galaxies and Elite Dangerous allow views from the cockpit, a simple yet crucial way to help players feel connected to their ships. It makes it feel like you, the player, are actually flying the ship, not paying some sap up in space to fly for you, who gives you a third-person view of it all. The differences are so incredibly diverse. These gameplay clips from Elite Dangerous, Star Wars Galaxies, and even the yet-to-launch Star Citizen just feel like interactive and adrenaline-pumping experiences. EVE Online's closest comparison to this? Yeah, that's the cockpit view in EVE Online. Now to be fair, EVE Online did have a VR game that came out in 2016 titled Valkyrie that had far more active combat and even cockpit views, so they certainly have the technology, but they seem quite content with what they currently have, and I think that is a significant mistake. I say all of this as an unbiased fan merely observing from the sidelines. I have no skin in the game, and I ultimately want EVE Online to succeed. I always have. I truly believe it's the paragon of a PvP MMO. Frankly speaking, it's one of the only true successful MMOs that are PvP centric that we've had ever. But as Star Citizen creeps slowly towards launch, and I mean slowly, it offers gameplay and mechanics on a scale that frankly dwarf EVE Online's. Sure, Star Citizen and other EVE Online competitors have a ways to go to be able to battle the size of the battles that EVE Online can contain, but in other ways, like the sizes of ships for example, ships that could potentially take dozens of actual players to run, whereas EVE Online has single operated ships, which is yet another factor that detracts from its gameplay when compared to competitors. I mean, even Star Wars Galaxies has gunboats that could have multiple people piloting the ship. But the size of ships aren't the only thing that a game like Star Citizen has over EVE Online. It's the marrying of ground and space gameplay. The ability to land on planets, explore planets, and even have settlements on planets. That is yet another crucial issue that EVE Online has frankly never properly admitted. EVE Online has little to no planetary interaction, and as the game's going on 15 years of running, it's really showing its age. Will CCP be able to transition EVE to compete with the next-gen sci-fi space games to come? Can they even compete with the mammoth budget and scale of the Kickstarter MMO Star Citizen? Now I want to make a serious note to people. It's not as simple as EVE Online just upgrading their tech and completely revamping their gameplay, because that could potentially mean that EVE Online would lose its own scale of battles, so I realize it's a sensitive thing for CCP. Still, I think this is worth pointing out as a flaw. Only time will tell ultimately how CCP does. But CCP has already made blunders in the form of an attempt at a ground-based gameplay portion titled Dust 514, which shut down in a relatively quiet fashion back in 2016. They even tried a card game that never came to fruition, and that's not counting their failed endeavor in World of Darkness Online, a video for another time. But EVE Online and CCP fans should be worried. Just a few days ago, CCP lost an executive producer. In years before that, they lost 3 developers, all the while losing 2 different studios and having to pull a full stop in making VR games. Hopefully they still have the resources required to evolve EVE Online, and hopefully they haven't made too many mistakes already to pull themselves out of this hole. Less not far from now, I have to revisit this topic with an unfortunate video. Thanks for watching, guys. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video and also support my content. If you want to support my content even more, you can head over to patreon.com/nerdSlayer. We've got some goals set up, we've got some reward tiers set up, and we even have an about blurb that details what we're going to be doing with the future of the channel. Anything's helpful, and you can donate as little as $1, which I will greatly appreciate. Thank you.